Hello, middle schoolers, and welcome to Ignite Online. I know this is kind of weird, and I wish you could be here in person, but we're going to make the best of it. We're starting a new series today called Rooted, where we'll be talking about the one thing that all of us has had to deal with in our lives, especially right now. It's one thing that we just can't avoid, and that's why we need to learn how to handle it well. What is it? Well, before I tell you that, I want to tell you a quick story. This is a story of a change that happened back when I was in high school. Back then, and even into college, sports meant everything to me. I played basketball and soccer, and I ran cross country. And when I say ran cross country, I mean I ran. I was the star freshman and the top female runner. I was running 5K races in under 20 minutes. Under 20 minutes! I don't think I could run that fast now if my life depended on it. But the whole school took notice. Everyone knew how fast I was, and honestly, I loved the attention. My freshman year, I missed going to state by 7 seconds. I was devastated, but I still had 3 more years to make it, right? Well, I trained hard that summer. I ran almost every single day. But when cross-country season finally rolled around again, it became obvious to myself, my coach, and the whole school that I was slower. What had happened? Well, what happened was what happens when you're a teenager. My body had changed, and I had gotten stronger, but stronger meant heavier, and heavier meant, well, not as fast. It was incredibly frustrating, and I felt helpless, mostly because this was something I couldn't control. I had done everything right. I had trained and eaten well, but I still wasn't able to control this change. It had ruined my chances of going to state and cross country. But the changes my body went through between freshman and sophomore year are exactly the changes that allowed me to excel at soccer the rest of high school and eventually led to me getting a college soccer scholarship. The change that had been so devastating actually turned out to be a great thing for me. But it doesn't always work out that perfectly. Maybe you haven't experienced a change like I did back then, but I'm sure you've experienced at least some kind of change in your life. If not, you're definitely experiencing change right now. I know you are all experiencing change, and we've all experienced it before, and we're going to do it again. That's why we're going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about it. You don't need me to tell you that change is happening all the time for you as a middle schooler. You're experiencing all kinds of changes in this phase of life. Some are good, some are bad, and some are, well, some are awkward. Think about it. Middle school means that there will be more independence, more opportunities, more trust, more things to try, and more people to get to know. New teams to try out for, new clubs to join at school, new kids to sit with at lunch, new church retreats to go on, new freedom to stay out longer with your friends. Those things all mean change, and those kind of changes aren't all that bad. They're easy to deal with because they're changes we want to happen. But unfortunately, there are other kinds of change that come up during this phase of life. Changes that we didn't choose and can't control. And they are the ones most of us don't like all that much. Like when you think everything is going okay in your family, and then your parents announce they're getting a divorce. Or when you feel settled at school with your group of friends, but find out you have to switch schools and make new friends halfway through the school year. When you couldn't wait to play on the team because this was the year your team was going to go all the way. But then you got injured and you had to sit out the entire season. Or when you get dumped out of the blue, or someone close to you passes away, or your best friend suddenly doesn't want to be your best friend anymore, or more recently, a pandemic hits and you have to stay at home. Those types of changes feel awful. Some of you may not totally relate because change for you is kind of exciting. And some of you totally get this because you, like me, hate change. In the middle of it, you feel sad, angry, frustrated, or confused. In fact, any kind of change, good or bad, leaves you feeling a little insecure and stressed out about what's next. You have no idea what's going on and no idea what's going to happen next. That leaves you feeling completely out of control. And nobody likes to feel out of control. Maybe that's the way that you've been feeling these last couple weeks. But here's the truth. No matter how we feel about it, change is going to happen. It's going to happen I'm 100% sure that there will be some wonderful changes that take place in your life, but I'm also 100% sure that there will be some changes you're not going to like, whether it's right now or in the future. Since that's the case, we need to figure out how to live in a world where change is coming. We need to learn how to stay strong and steady when change happens. Now, I've got some good news for you here. People have been struggling with how to handle change forever. When you open the pages of the Bible and read from the writers of God, you'll see that they too struggled with the idea of change. They went through a lot of the same stuff that you're going through. Loss, broken relationships, heartbreak, uncertainty, insecurity, and so much more. And many of them wrestled with the question of how they could trust God when their lives seemed to be a constant series of unwanted and unexpected changes. But over and over again in the Bible, the writers who were dealing with so much change kept coming back to the same truth. And while many of them had a lot to say about dealing with change, I think the author of the book of Hebrews said it best. See, Hebrews is a letter written to Christians during that time that included some very practical advice about how to navigate life. The writer gave them a lot of great advice, like how to remember to love one another and be kind to strangers and make sure you don't fall in love with money. But then the writer dropped this incredible piece of information to help them and all of us deal with a life that can bring so much uncertainty and so much change. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8, it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Did you hear that? Jesus never changes. He is always the same. And in a world marked by constant change, I think that's great news. It means that we have access to the one thing in our life that never changes, and that's God. So why is that so important? Let me explain it to you this way. Have you ever seen a huge tree? Maybe you have one in your backyard right now, or you've seen one at the park or on TV. I'm talking about one of those big, sturdy trees with tons of branches and big, bulky leaves. You know, like they have at Animal Planet in Disney World. The perfect tree for climbing on, if you ask me. What is it that keeps these trees in the ground? It's roots, right? That tree is secured into the ground and holds steady in its place because of its roots. So every season, when the weather changes, when the wind blows and the ice comes, the rain falls, the sun beams down, the fog covers, the drought hits, that tree isn't moved. With all that change happening around it, it would be easy to think that that tree would just fall down and give up. But it doesn't. It's rooted in place no matter what is going on around it. And that's what an unchanging God does for us. He keeps us rooted. When our eyes are focused on Him, the one who never changes, we're able to stay steady and secure, like a tree that's unshakable and unbreakable in the midst of life changes. Think about it like this. Have you ever seen a dancer spin around and around and around, and you wonder how they don't get completely dizzy? With all that change and movement happening with their body, you'd think they'd fall flat on their face, but they don't. Do you know why they stay so stable? It is because they focus their eyes on a single spot in the room. As they turn, their gaze doesn't leave that spot. Finding that spot over and over and over again helps them avoid dizziness, feeling unstable, and possibly hurting themselves. And that's exactly how it is when we put our trust and focus on God. He keeps us steady. And when we're safe and stable, when we're rooted with God, we can be confident that our lives will reflect His goodness. The book of Psalms puts this perfectly. It says, they are trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. That's from Psalm chapter 1, verse 3. Doesn't that sound like something you want for your life? To be the kind of person whose roots are so deep in God that your life is full and beautiful. The kind of person who will stay strong and secure in all they do. Even in the midst of all this change, to be rooted in God. Remember, God never changes. He is the solid, unmovable ground on which we can root our lives. And that's why no matter what change is happening around us, no matter what pandemic hits, we can remain secure when our eyes are fixed on Him. God never changes. It was true back then when the writer of the Hebrews said it, and it's still true today. But what does that mean for you? It means that God, who loves you now, will always love you. It means God, who cares for you now, will always care for you. It means God, who is with you now, will always be with you. It means that during this change and the changes to come, you don't have to be uprooted by insecurity, fear, or frustration. Instead, you can remain steady and stable by staying rooted in an unchanging God. To help you do that, I want you to try just one thing for me. I want you to remember a time that God was faithful to you in the past. I want you to remember a time where you felt God's love in your life. I want you to remember a time where you saw God's goodness. Maybe it was coming to this church and finding your small group. Maybe it was at the Generate retreat. Maybe it was when your mom got better after being sick. Or maybe your dad finally got that job. Maybe it was a time where something worked out just the way you prayed it would. Remember those things in your life, and I want you to write a few of them down. Talk about it with your parents or your small group leader. Keep the list in your phone. Share it with your friends. And then remember that the same God who was there when those things happened is the same God who's with you now in the midst of this change. If he was faithful in that circumstance or that season of your life, then you can stay rooted in the belief that he will be faithful again. He will be faithful right now. For those of you who aren't sure what you believe about God or don't know if you've seen him be faithful, that's okay. Just think about a time in your life where something really good happened. Write that down and remember it. Or ask your parent to share a story like that from their own life. I know they all have plenty of examples of how God has come through for them in the past. Use those stories as a starting point to consider the fact that God might be working in and around your life too. This week, I want you to remember that God never changes. And because of that, you can stay rooted in him even when life changes around you. I hope you guys go through those small group questions together as a family, with your parent or with your small group leader. And I just want to remind you that I'm rooting for you, that Jesus loves you, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.